Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Colleen, and let's just talk about some weird stuff. So, I was thinking about bands the other day, and I was like, you know what would be interesting? The weirdest bands that have ever existed and that exist now. So, let's talk about some weird bands that have existed and actually exist now. So, let's start off with, okay, a lot of these names I'm going to butcher, but bear with me. So Stalaggh, also known as Gulaggh, so it's Stalaggh or Gulaggh. So they seem to have two names, and this consisted of band members from Dutch and Belgium. So it was kind of like a mishmash of people, and they were a black metal band. Now, I love me some metal. I really love me some metal, but this sounds like a band I would not be into, and this is why. So they used to use actual mental patients in their music. So on 3 of their albums, they actually used mental patients, and these albums were between 2002 and 2007. Now, one of their members worked at a mental hospital, like they were somebody who worked there, and they somehow got permission, which I don't know, but they somehow got permission to use some of the patients in their stuff, which either this mental hospital is absolutely terrible, or they were doing it and just said they got permission, you know, kind of thing. But that's what they did. They used these poor mental hospital patients in their music. And they said they did this because they wanted actual dark despair in the music, which I think this is absolutely horrifying. This is terrible. Now, I love metal, like I've said before. I love all types of metal. And the one thing that bothers me with metal bands, and I actually won't listen to their music even if I'm not a fan of it, is the people that do dumb stuff like this. So I don't know, I feel like I've met a good amount of metal musicians, you know, going to concerts and whatnot, but and they've all been very sweet and very kind, and I've never met one that was not. So I like to stick with people who are very sweet and very kind, you know, in real life. And that actually goes for a huge portion of metal bands. So these are just some that are the exception, I guess. They're not all metal, I promise. But I thought I'd just throw that in there just so you are not thinking, oh, metal bands are terrible. They're not. Most of them are not terrible. Most of them are really nice people. They just like really heavy music. So let's move on to a punk metal band from Seattle. Now, this band is called NME. So just the letters N, M, and E. So they were one of the first extreme metal bands in the US. I put air quotes around extreme metal. You can't see it, but I'm telling you I did. Not only was their music extreme, but the frontman, Kurt Strubing, it's Struebing, but Kurt Strubing was actually convicted of murder in 1986 because, hold on to your lunch, kids, he chopped his mother into pieces with a hatchet, which is absolutely terrible, and oh, I can't. It's so terrible. But after he was released, surprise, he was released in the first place, the band actually got back together and continued to do music for a while. But he ended up taking his own life in 2005. So I'm not sure. I couldn't find exact like dates for this, but I'm not sure when he was released and came back. But they did end, and they're no longer a thing, and this is probably for the best. Once again, this is a metal band that they're making bad names for their music genre, which is absolutely just horrifying. Let's move on to Radio Werewolf. Now, this one is a doozy. So, during the height of the satanic period, hysteria that was in like around the mid-80s in America, they were considered the most dangerous band in the world. Now, this was due to the notoriety of their vocalist, Zena Shrek? S-C-H-R-E-K. I don't know, maybe Shrek. But this was because Zena was the daughter of Anton LaVey. Now, if you don't know who Anton LaVey is, he was actually the founder of the Church of Satan. I also think he wrote the Satanic Bible as well, or something like that. I've done some research into him. His whole thing is really interesting. If you want to hear a podcast about it, tweet me at GSMC_weird news. But let's continue with this. So he's the founder of this, and so in the music, they actually use Nazi imagery, necrophilia, serial killers, and mysterious cult rituals. I don't know if it was just in their music. Well, it was probably a mixture of in their music and also music videos. So I do believe people thought they were very dangerous because it was really pushing the Satanic Church. I don't think they're doing anything bad. I don't know. Let them do their thing. But anyway, so the big reason that this band was so big was because Zena was the daughter of Anton LaVey, and it was a big thing then. And this was when the Satanic Church was really coming into the media, and like I said earlier, it was called Satanic Panic. I said period. I'm so sorry. But it was during the Satanic Panic hysteria, which was, like I said too, in the mid-80s in America. So this really, I think, was what was kind of pushing them to the forefront. And I do think they were probably using a lot of this material not to promote the Satanic Church, but I think they were using it to really kind of just shock. I think what they were after was a shock value. I couldn't find anything that said anything about actual, killings or murders or whatever that was associated to Radio Werewolf, but I really thought that, I thought that they deserve a spot on this list because it is very strange that the daughter of somebody so big makes a band and then just goes full force into the ridiculous with their imagery and their, music. I don't know. Once again, this is just giving a bad name to music. I understand using music videos and stuff like that as shock value, and that's actually really popular nowadays in music videos and also in just music in general. I actually am an award-winning music video director. I know, it sounds like I'm tooting my own horn, but I am an award-winning music video director. I've directed a good few music videos, and I try not to really go for a shock value. Even if I do go for a shock value, it's like a second of something and not really the whole music video, because the shock value really pulls people in. It does, and it's a good selling point, but at the same time, I feel like you can really overdo it, and then you just turn into this band, or you turn the band that you're doing the music video for into just shock value, and that's all the people are looking for at that point. Now, I'm going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will continue with some more weird bands that exist and have existed.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. Now, before the break, we were talking about weird bands that have existed. I believe the ones that I talked about don't exist now. But let's move on to some more. So let's talk about Father Yod and Yahowha 13. So this kind of brings us back to a podcast or two ago, where we were talking about strange cults. Now, Father Yod did not make the cut in that one, but he'll make the cut in this one. Yod was the founder of the Source movement, which was like a spiritual commune / cult. Like, it was a cult that was big in Hollywood in the early 70s. Now, Yod used his all the earnings that he had gotten from this cult and actually put them all into a giant mansion in the Hollywood Hills. So basically he used all the earnings that he got from this cult, probably offerings and whatnot, and he used that to buy this mansion, which he filled with hippies and musicians, where they played all day and they did drugs all day. That was pretty much it. I thought it was really interesting that there was actually a full-blown cult leader who had a band. Now, let's move on to some more in the strange region. So, let's talk about Zolar X. The Zolar X came about in the mid-70s, and they were a mixture between glam and punk rock. Now, these guys, let me tell you, they dressed like silver-suited, antenna-headed space surfers. This is real. And they talked in their own alien language. Now, this band baffled Hollywood. So they were in Hollywood, and people were just intrigued and confused and what is this? If I was in that time and I saw this, I would be like, I need to listen, because what is this? And they were really big because of how strange they were. Once again, it's that tactic of being a lot and using weird imagery in your music because it brings people in. Now, they were big and stuff until they just vanished in a puff of green smoke in 1981. So they just kind of vanished. They were just gone. Yeah, so that's a thing. I actually didn't listen to theirs, but I think I'll go back and actually listen to their music because I'm very curious. But these next two, I definitely listened to their music because I was so confused. So let's talk about the All Sports Band. So there was a sound engineer named Tracy Coates who came up with this weird idea. He was like, what if we made a hetero sports-based Village People? So he wanted to make a just a straight village people that was all about sports. And the results of that idea was the all sports band. Now, they do kind of sound like the Village People. Like I said, I did listen to them. Some of the ones in the beginning I didn't listen to just because of their stories, and I didn't want to, it was just kind of a weird area. But the all sports band had a boxing drummer, a football and baseball player for guitar and bass, and then a race car driver on keyboard, and a karate kicking singer. Now, obviously that didn't go anywhere because I'd never heard of this, and pretty much anybody that I asked had never heard of the all sports band. But they really do sing about, wanting, oh, you're a lady and you want a strong man, and, sports and stuff. It's a really strange mixture of music and, like, the sound of the Village People. It's really weird. I don't know if it really displays hetero, but that's the thing. Let's move on to the next one. Now, this one is my favorite, or one of my absolute favorites that I found. So this is Caninus, Caninus. Now, they are a death grind band. I did listen to them. They're definitely death grind. But they started the band and started making music in 2003. Now, the vocalists are Basil and Budgie. Now, they have cute names, don't get me wrong, because they are two female pit bulls. I'm not kidding you. The vocalists of this death grind band are female pit bulls. Now, this is the greatest idea I've ever heard, and I listen to them, and it's just death grind music with dogs barking, and I love everything about it. It's just so funny. But, so people credit this guy, Don Lilker, Lilker, of a band called Nuclear Assault, as the originator. They say that he's the originator of this whole idea of the dogs being the vocalist. And that's because he ended up sending out a joke demo to a bunch of different labels with his dog's vocals on it. And Caninus or whatever, took it to another level and made a whole band around it. Now, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard. I will definitely have to post this on the Twitter and the Facebook because it is so great and so weird. I'll try and post some of the weirder ones on Facebook so you guys, and the Twitter at GSMC_weird news and Facebook GSMC weird news. I have to because they are so interesting to listen to. But unfortunately, the band split up after the sad passing of both of the dogs. Now, this is a sadness. This is super sad. We don't deserve dogs. They're incredible. I love dogs. I got 2 dogs, and they're actually hanging out right next to me right now. But this is one of the coolest things I've ever heard. Let's just talk about that. This is one of the coolest things I've ever heard. It's just so weird and so, it's a lot. If you've never heard death grind before, it might be way too much for you. I've heard death grind before. It's not my favorite genre, but I do listen to 1 or 2 songs on occasion. But this is the greatest thing. Literally, it's just dogs barking over music, and I love everything about that. I don't know if it's just the fact that I love dogs and I love animals altogether is why I love it so much, but I don't know, someone should bring this back. Maybe not with the death grind, but someone should do this again because it is so fantastic. I don't know. I love it. I'm definitely going to post it at the Twitter at GSMC_weird news and also on the Facebook GSMC weird news. because you guys have to listen to this. It is so fun. It's just so weird, but it's so fun. Now, before I keep talking about dogs, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about some more weird bands.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Hello, and welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. Now, before the break, we were talking about weird bands that have existed and some that do exist today. Now, I've been talking mostly about ones that have existed, but I will talk about more that exist now in a little bit. But let's bring it on over to Impaled Northern Moonfest. Now, they are an acoustic black metal band. Now, I listened to them because I was very curious, and man, it's something. So, Impaled Northern Moonfest, they started off as an offshoot of it. Okay, I can't say the name of this band because it is unnecessarily crude, and both words are just not words that I should say at all, or anyone should say, so we'll call them AC. Now, apparently they were an offshoot of AC, and according to, I'm not sure who, but somebody, so this is kind of a rumored fact, but they went full acoustic to avoid disrupting someone who was slumbering nearby. Now, I don't know if that's true, but that's kind of what's all out there when you're talking about this band or looking up this band. Now, this band is, like I said, an acoustic black metal band, and it features a solo acoustic guitar, a knee-slapping percussion, and a semi-screaming vocalist that you can't understand a word he says. Now, a lot of times when people listen to music that's got a lot of screaming in it, they can't understand. I listen to a lot of music that has screaming in it, so I'm pretty, I guess, versed in it. Like, I can understand a majority of what they're saying, but I could not understand a word, and I don't even want to call it like screaming. It was like a weird guttural talking screaming. Like, it was really strange. This is probably one of the strangest things I've heard. I've seen metal bands do acoustic of their songs, and usually it's pretty good, and they really changed it towards the acoustic style. But this is really like they took the metal singing from like an actual like full metal album and then took the singing out and put it over some acoustic guitar and someone that's just slapping their knee. Now I tried to kind of recreate the actual sound of the song that I heard, because that was like the beginning of the song was just this like almost galloping sound that was drummed on the knee. But yeah, it's really strange. Let's move on. So this one is so cool. I'm definitely gonna post a video of these guys, because this is probably one of the coolest things that I saw. This band is called Compressor Head. They are an instrumental robot band. Now, when you're thinking instrumental robot band, you're thinking like synthesizers and stuff. But each member, they were actually built from recycled metal between 2007 and 2012, and they play actual instruments, which is so cool. I saw a video of this, and it was so cool. Whoever made these is just so smart. but they are a cover band, and they cover mostly Motorhead, AC/DC, Pantera, and the Ramones. And they're good. I mean, it's really cool. They're a 4-piece band, and actually they had recently started a Kickstarter to raise enough money to build a vocalist, but sadly their funding has fallen short. But this is one of the coolest things I've seen. It is kind of incredible to watch robots playing music, and they do have no vocals, obviously, because they are trying to raise money to build a vocalist. And I can imagine that's very expensive. Because, I mean, programming, it's itself building a robot and programming it to play an instrument is one thing, but programming a robot to have like a voice box and all of that sounds way more difficult and a lot more expensive. But this is one of the coolest things that I've seen. It is really cool, really killer. I'm definitely going to post it at the Twitter at GSMC_weird news because I want you guys to see it. This is so cool. This guy is a genius. Let's move on to a strange one. This is the Monks. Now that sounds kind of like your average band name, but they're not very average. They wear monk garb. When you look at them, they look like your stereotypical monk. They wear the monk robes with the tassels, and they shave their head in that like bald on the top and ring around style. I'll have to post a picture of them too so you can kind of understand what I mean if you're not getting it. But they make like a primal rock rhythms, and they do it on a banjo that is actually been strung with guitar strings instead of the normal banjo strings, and they sound killer. Like, I actually really like the sound of this band, but their lyrics are something else. Now, let me quote some of their lyrics to kind of explain to you what I mean. The lyrics, and I quote, "My brother died in Vietnam. James Bond, who is he? We don't like the atomic bomb." Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. Their lyrics are weird. The sound of the band is really cool, and I enjoy it. It's not something that's weird to your ear when you hear it. The lyrics themselves are weird, but that's weird. And the weirdest part of all of this, the weirdest part of this entire band, at first you're like, oh, it's monks, and, you know, they're playing rock music, and they got weird lyrics. And that's weird, but the strangest part is they're not monks. They are they were American GIs that were stationed in Germany in 1965. So these guys were American GIs who were stationed in Germany and decided to make this weird monk band. And so it kind of makes sense when they're talking about, like, my brother died in Vietnam, and we don't like the atomic bomb. Like, that kind of stuff makes sense, but I don't know where James Bond, who is he, comes in. And a lot of their lyrics, when I was kind of listening to their music, did sound kind of war-related and, like, peace-related. So I can kind of understand where that comes from if they were, you know, since they were GIs, American GIs. So it makes sense. But it's really strange that, you know, it's kind of weird to see, because when you look at the picture, they just look like monks. They look like your average monk. You would not think twice that they're American GIs or anything else than a monk, but they are definitely not. And they're called the Monks. It's really strange, but like I said, once again, the music is really good. I enjoy the music, at least. It's just kind of your 60s rock, and I enjoy a lot of, you know, 60s, 70s rock and stuff like that. But I think that's, I don't know, I thought this was really interesting because of, you know, you're like, oh, the monks and their monk singing, and that's cool, but it's the fact that they were American GIs that's really strange to me. And it was also really strange that their music was so good. I don't know. I listened to them. I also listened to like I said, I listened to the Impaled Northern Moonfest, which is just beyond strange. And then I also listened to Compressor Head, since I had to see robots playing instruments. Like, that's the coolest thing. I don't know, it's just so cool. But let's take a quick break, and when I come back, we'll talk about some more bands. Some more weird bands that exist and have existed.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC, Invicta FC, Bellator, and One Championship. We got the fights covered. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. Now, before the break, and this entire podcast, we've been talking about weird bands that have existed and exist today. Now, let's move on. So I listened to all of these bands I'm about to talk about, and besides the facts I have for you, I have some stuff to say about their music. So let's move on to Abruptum. Now, they were dubbed the audial essence of pure black evil. And they were dubbed this by Mayhem guitarist Enormous, like it's real weird. And it's two other members, which are It and Evil. And apparently they raised hell with torturous and horrific atmospheric noise. Now, I heard this and I was so confused. When I read this first, I was really confused on what they meant. So I went and I listened, and man, this is not for the faint of heart. This is something that's really uncomfortable to listen to. It's a lot of screaming and but it's not like screaming like in music. It's like there's weird horror sounds and someone's being tortured. It sounds like you're listening to a horror movie and not watching it. It's really strange. I love horror movies, but I'm not about this. This is something that I'm not gonna post, but if you guys decide to go listen to it, listen with caution because it's so uncomfortable to listen to. Now let's talk about the producer, Peter Tagtgren, Tagtgren. Not sure how to say that, but he explained that he would just leave them to make their music. He wouldn't stay around while they made it. He'd just leave them. And when he came back, there was blood all over the walls and one of their albums in the can. That's an actual quote, is blood all over the walls and one of their albums in the can. Now, this band is just, I can't. The music is so uncomfortable to listen to, and I'm not about it. Let's move on to Velvet Cacoon. Now, they appeared in the early 2000s, and they're an ambient, black metal underground band that made a bunch of outlandish claims about their backstory. Let's talk about this. They say, or were they really eco-terrorist elves? Did they really have a metal guitar that was wired to diesel-powered tubes that were transmitting sound via fiber optics through a 15-gallon aquarium of seawater, wine, and blood? No, they were not. This was all a hoax. But I listened to this too, and it honestly sounds like Sméagol or Gollum from Lord of the Rings saying words you can't understand over weird ambient music. Not for me. Definitely not a fan. I didn't listen to the whole song, just like I didn't listen to the whole song from Abruptum, because it was just kind of uncomfortable. Not as uncomfortable as Abruptum, but definitely just weird. And they made all these weird claims that they were elves, that were eco-terrorists, that had metal guitars that were wired to diesel-powered tubes, transmitting sounds via fiber optics through a 15-gallon aquarium of seawater, wine, and blood. Now, what? Like, this is one of the weirdest things. So obviously they were a very gimmicky band, something that they really wanted to pull people in, but it was all a hoax. They did not have all of this stuff, so they weren't eco-terrorists, they weren't elves, and people thought it was a hoax, and they were right. Like, it's just odd, like really strange on another level, and their music is just so weird, not something that I enjoy at all. Let's move on to Sleepytime Gorilla Museum. Now, I actually enjoy this. I really enjoy Sleepytime Gorilla Museum. Didn't think I was going to, because they are described as a nightmarish, surrealist, progressive metal band. Now, I love progressive metal, and I think that's kind of why I like this band. I really like their music. I like the way the singer's got such a deep voice, and I really enjoy it. And I don't know, that's just it's for me. But they use custom built instruments, including the tangularium, the pedal action wiggler, and the electric pancreas. Now, what? Like, I have nothing else to say but what? It's really strange that they claim this, but their music's really good. I don't know, maybe that's just me. But also, let's talk about their self-proclaimed mission. Now, this threw me for a doozy. I don't know. Okay, so their oh my gosh, words today. Their self-proclaimed mission is to destroy rock music with the power of rock music. What? Like, what? I just don't get it. Like, I mean, it's probably just still gimmicky. A lot of these things are just gimmicky to get attention. But, man, if they didn't have this gimmick and they went as just a band, I think they'd do really, really well, honestly. Like, their weird custom built instruments with their electric pancreas and action wiggler, like, come on. And then they want to destroy rock music with the power of rock music. It's strange on another level, but I really did enjoy the music. So I was listening to it while I read about it, because I was trying to figure out what an electric pancreas sounded like, to be honest. And it was really good. Like, I don't know. I really enjoy it as a fan of progressive metal. I don't know. I just like it. The music video I kept glancing back at while I was reading about them, and it's just real strange and old-timey looking. But that kind of seems to be their thing. I think they're kind of along the lines of, like, trying to be a little steampunky. But, I enjoyed it, but their whole claims are really weird. Now let's talk about one more weird thing about them. So their first concert, you'd think, performed in a small crowd or whatever, and that's fine. No. Their first concert was performed to a single banana slug. What? I feel bad for that banana slug a little bit. Either bad or he got the best concert of his life. I don't know. But this band literally performed to a single banana slug in their first concert, and they're not shy to talk about it. It's... I don't know if that's also a gimmick thing. It might really just be another gimmick thing, but it's hilarious. They want to ruin rock music with rock music and then perform to, I don't know, banana slugs? At least they performed to one. I don't know, maybe their next step is to perform to a stadium filled with banana slugs. Could you imagine? I would love to be the only person at that concert. I really would. Just to be able to, like, take pictures of this band and, like, video of this band performing to a stadium filled with banana slugs. I don't know. I thought this was hilarious. I thought this band was really good. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. But let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk about some more weird bands that have existed and exist in the now.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. Now, before the break and this entire podcast, we've been talking about weird bands that have existed and exist today. Now, let's talk about Fantomas? Fantomas? I'm not sure. Fantomas, and it's got a weird little doodle above the U, or the O, excuse me. Let's talk about Fantomas. That's what I'm going to call him. So this band consists of Mike Patton, who's the front man, Melvin's Slayer, and Mr. Bungle. Yeah. They've released 4 studio albums, and each one just different and weirder than the next. They are like a weird mesh of metal lounge and avant-garde sounds. Now, I listened to them, and literally what I heard was just dink, 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 like on the drum, and the front man, our Mr. Mike Patton, was just like staring at him intensely, and I kept having to skip through it because that's all it was, until it got to one part where he started making just weird sounds. It got really heavy and metal, and he's just making weird sounds in the microphone, and then he stops. And then the dinking starts again on the drum, and then it happens again, and then it stops. And then again. It was just the weirdest thing I've ever heard. But anyway, they use different concepts for each of their albums, ranging from one horrific 74-minute-long track that made up a whole album. So a whole album that was one 74-minute-long track. It's ridiculous. And from there to a brief blast of noise, which I assume this is what I heard, but just 2 brief blasts of noise for a comic book themed record. Yeah. Real weird, real strange. Not a fan, but apparently they had been on a 6-year hiatus, but then reformed for a tour back in 2014. And that's the last they've been heard of. So they basically took a 6-long year hiatus, came back, did a tour, and then vanished off the face of the earth. I don't know. This is one of the strangest things I've ever heard. That was the number one thing I could find, was that weird sound and noise. I don't know. It was just so strange, and I can't even explain it. Now, let's move on to Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band. You heard me correctly. Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band. Now, Don Van Vliet, V-L-I-E-T, aka Captain Beefheart, started out as like a group that did some R&B in the 60s, and that was Captain Beefheart and his merry band. They were said to be the next Rolling Stones. That's kind of what they were set to be, and Captain Beefheart did not like that. He was not a fan of that. So he ended up doing everything to be the exact opposite of what they were. He did not want to be known as the next Rolling Stones. He didn't, I don't know why he didn't want to be that big, but he got real mad about it and went a complete opposite direction. Now I listened to this, and man, is it strange. And the cover of an album was a man with a fish head. I don't know if that's constant, but that's what I listened to. And it was a bunch of talking in the beginning, and then some music with just the weirdest things said around it. It was, I don't even know how to explain this. Man, so they kind of like consist of slivers of normal music, but mostly just pure confusion and weirdness. I don't know how else to explain it. It is so difficult. But apparently, Captain Beefheart, ended up retiring in 1982 to focus on abstract art, which makes sense because I'm pretty sure his music is just abstract art. It is the strangest garble you will ever hear. I'll probably post a little bit of it because it's not bad. It's not like uncomfortable like some of the other things we've talked about. It's just weird. But he left to work on abstract art in 1982, and then eventually he passed in 2010. But his music lives on. That's a thing. So I'll probably post that on the Twitter at GSMC_weird news. I can't explain it, so I'm gonna have to post it. I'll probably post it on the Facebook as well, GSMC Weird News. And cause you guys gotta hear this to know what I'm talking about. This also goes for the next one. Now, this one is a doozy. This one is even stranger than our friend Captain Beefheart and his magic band. Let's talk about the Residents. So, sounds pretty tame, right? Well, it's hard to even categorize what type of music they are. So, they've got like avant-garde compositions and a one-of-a-kind like multimedia projects. Like their music videos are the strangest things, and they're really, really short songs. And what I had seen when I listened, it was like a short little song with a weird multimedia presentation, a stop, another weird song with a weird little thing, and then a stop, and they was just very short and not really long songs. Now, they take standard music and kind of create strange sounds, rhythms, and tones that fit their weird concept, but man, it makes no sense. Also, they use a lot of eyeball imagery in their music. I'm not 100% sure why, but this is one of the weirdest things I've ever heard. And I've heard some weird things, like, don't get me wrong, especially listening to all these other bands, almost all. Didn't listen to some of the beginning ones because they were a little harsh, but I don't know how to explain it. It is so strange. I will also post this on the at GSMC _Twitter and the GSMC Facebook, because this is so strange and I don't know how else to describe it. And this is a podcast, and you can't just sit here and watch and listen to things with me. I mean, you can listen to me, but I want to like really bring home that this is one of the strangest things I've ever heard. 110% the weirdest things. And I mean, Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band is really weird, as well as Fantomas or Fantomas or whatever. They're really strange, but this takes the cake when it comes to weird. And it's not uncomfortable or like unsettling. It's just really strange and avant-garde. That's why I really want to post it to show you guys, because it's not uncomfortable, weird, there are no murders in it, no weird thing like that. It's just this weird, like, otherworldly is kind of what they're going for, kind of alien-esque thing that just doesn't make sense and is really, really unbelievably hard to explain. Now, I really wish that I could explain this to you, but I'm definitely going to have to just send the video out on the Facebook and the Twitter for you guys to go see and watch. I'm going to do that with a lot of these, so prepare for a lot of posts because I will be doing this the minute this comes out. I've saved all the music videos so I can just send them out on the Twitter. This is just so strange. This is just one of the weirdest things. Now, before I keep trying to explain and not be able to explain to you the residents, let's take a quick break, and when I come back, let's talk about some more weird bands, but maybe some that you haven't heard of, but I've definitely heard of before.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. Now, before the break, and once again this entire podcast, we've been talking about bands, like strange bands that have existed and exist today. Now, I want to focus mainly right now, and at the end of this, about bands that exist today, ones that I've actually known about. Ones that I've known about for a while, and ones that need to be talked about and actually aren't on a lot of lists of weird bands, and I don't know why. So let's talk about, first and foremost, my favorite of weird bands, Okilly Dokilly. Now, I've known about this band for a while, and some of you actually might have heard of this band or seen this band on TV, and I'll tell you why. So Okilly Dokilly is a heavy metal band that they all dress up as Ned Flanders from The Simpsons. Now, not only do they dress up as Ned Flanders from The Simpsons, they all call themselves Ned Flanders. So you've got head Ned, guitar Ned, bass Ned, drum Ned, and all of their lyrics are actual quotes from Ned Flanders. So they actually started out as just something fun to do at local clubs in Phoenix. They didn't think that this was going to take off. They thought that this was just going to be a fun thing for them to do and it would get a good few laughs. And then 5 years later from that, they ended up touring in a van that they appropriately called the Ned Vanders. They also dress up as Ned Flanders in the green sweater with the, I'll post a photo of them, and I'll also post a music video of them. So they dress up as Ned Flanders, and they actually ended up catching the eye of the people at The Simpsons, and they ended up playing the music video for White Wine Spritzer over the closing credits for the episode I'm Just a Girl Who Can't Say Dough. Now, this is ridiculous. So this is probably where you might have heard of them from, but they are actually amazing. I like them so much. They are hilarious. They are great. all their lyrics are ridiculous because they're all Ned Flanders quotes, and I really like their music video, so I'll definitely post that on the @GSMC_ Weird News Twitter and GSMC Weird News Facebook page. Now, they are still a thing today. I mean, they got popular, and they had this episode not very long ago, and they have tour dates for 2020. So if you're looking for something to do and you see that Okilly Dokilly is coming to your town, go see them. It sounds like such a fun show. It sounds like such a good time. Now let's move on to another one that I've known about that I believe have actually toured with Okilly Dokilly. I think they did, but don't quote me on that. And this is Sabbath. Now, they are an American parody heavy metal tribute band from LA. Los Angeles, California, and they started in 2014. Now, they are the self-appointed founders of the drive-through metal genre. Drive-through metal genre. They are the appointed founders. They primarily parody Black Sabbath songs, with songs like Parabuns, which is a cover for Paranoid, Frying Pan, a cover for Iron Man, Sweet Beef, a cover for Sweet Leaf, and Never Say Diet, or a cover for Never Say Die. Now, their lyrics are actually centered on fast food, and they address negative health effects and lack of nutritional value, as well as low-wage jobs and consumerism, along with a bunch of other things that they talk about. So they actually kind of have a semi-good message, but they are a parody of Black Sabbath. They're hilarious to listen to, and they all dress up as McDonald's characters. Now, I'm sorry, it's just kind of funny. I was looking at a picture of them earlier. I was listening, just to hear their new stuff, because they are currently still touring and playing. And let's talk about their names. So you've got vocalist Ronald Osborne, bassist Grimalis, guitar Slayer McCheese, and the drummer is Cat Burglar or Peter Chris Cut Fries. Yeah, it's great. They also actually recently met Ozzy Osbourne, and he loves them. He thinks they are so hilarious. I can't actually quote him because he uses a lot of bad words, but he thinks they're absolutely fantastic and hilarious, and he met them and he had a great time. So I think that's kind of a great thing when the band that you're parodying is like, you know what, this is great, you guys are hilarious, keep doing what you're doing. Now, I'm not excited to talk about this next band because I've known about them and you've probably heard about them. They've been on television. They tour a lot, or they come a lot to my city, and I do not like them, but we could not make this weird bands podcast without talking about GWAR. Now, that's spelled GWAR. They are a heavy metal band that was formed in 1984 and are still going on today. They formed in Richmond, Virginia, and they have constant rotating musicians, and to this day they are still going, like I said, but with no original founding members. So they're all new members, no original founding members. They don grotesque costumes. I am not going to post any videos or any photos because their costumes can get a little rated R or more, and I'd rather not. I also just don't want to promote them because I can't stand them. They're a lot, and let me tell you why. So they don these grotesque costumes that are just over the top. They're trying to be like warriors and somewhat fantasy, but they use in their music and in their shows over-the-top, like, violent, sexual, and satological humor incorporating political satire. Now, their shows are a whole thing. I've never gone to one. I know people who have been to them. I know people who like GWAR, and I just can't with them. Now, at their shows, they have graphic violence, and the audience will be sprayed with lots of fake blood, urine, and other stuff that I can't talk about, and I don't want to share with you guys. Now, GWAR goes really far. They've been on talk shows. They used to appear on MTV. They've done so much stuff, and they're on every list for weird bands because they are extremely strange, and I just don't think they're good. I don't think their music's good. I don't like what they stand for because it's just all over the place and overly sexual and very, very violent and not a good thing. Now, I'm just going to cut it off there with GWAR, and I want to thank you guys so much for listening to me ramble about bands, about weird bands. I love music. I play music, and I sing music all the time, and I actually thought of this idea because I'm doing some shows with a friend of mine and another friend, and they were talking about band names, and everything they gave was really strange and just weird. So I thought that this would be a good idea to talk about. I want to thank you guys so much for listening to me, and thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. And if you really like podcasts, the GSMC Podcast Network has pretty much everything. They have a topic podcast for anything you like. Go check them out. Once again, this is thank you for listening for I'm just rambling. Once again, thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Colleen, and I will talk to you in the next one.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.